it's an up and down failure from top to bottom. And it's usually related to communication. Like, we're not talking to each other enough about how to properly make these decisions so that organization runs smoothly. And if you wait to start communicating until that moment when it's gone bad, then you've already lost. It needs to be a constant conversation.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, clean freaks, welcome back to another Beyond Clean podcast. This is season 32 SPD Fact Check, and today's topic is all about the numbers. We titled it the $4,999 problem, and if you're an SPD manager out there, you know exactly what we mean. It's only an issue if it's underneath that spending limit. And I don't know what your spending limit is. I've seen anywhere from $3,000 up to north of $5,000, but it is definitely one of those weird quirks in SPD that I'm looking forward to diving into today. Joining me in studio and for the whole season is our superstar co-host for the season, Jamie Amaya. Welcome back to the studio, Jamie.
Hey, how's it going, Bobby?
I'm doing good. Glad to be talking with you about this one. You know, we try to have a little bit of fun on Beyond Clean, and this is my idea of fun, Jamie, is talking about numbers and data, because I haven't spent a lot of time talking with finance about this, so I think it's going to be a useful one for folks today.
I definitely agree. I wouldn't call it fun, but definitely agree. It's the $4,999 conversation. And I've seen it go way below 1,000, which is shocking in our world of sterile processing. It's, how do you even get what you need for just the day at that price? But it's definitely going to be an interesting.
I don't know what a bundle or a case of wraps cost these days, but yeah, that seems like that would be a challenge trying to operate. Well,
I will tell you, the more you get involved with your finances, you start to remember a whole bunch of numbers. So that's for sure. I can tell you how much a case of wrap is depending on what you use. And then you start to realize, well, wait a minute, I can save some money and this might help me on the back end. So if there's not a lot of leaders out there managing their budget, then they should start.
That's right. So lean in, grab your finance buddies, get your other leaders on board here. We're going to be talking to a hospital accounting manager about SPD and how some of these operational capital expenditures really work. And we'll be right back with Steven Benzel after a short break.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio is Steven Benzel, Director of Accounting at LifeSpring Health Systems in Kentucky, Indiana area. Steven, it's fun to see you in studio here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it.
For those of you who don't know, which would be, I guess, just about all of you, Steven and I have known each other for a little while here in this funny healthcare circle in Louisville, Kentucky, and ended up at the same church together, and have had quite a few conversations around finances, and so thought it would be great to pick your brain some today, Steven, on healthcare accounting, finance, and sterile processing. So why don't you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been doing, and what your background is.
You got it. So I have been an accountant for 22 years. 100% of that was in healthcare accounting, corporate healthcare accounting, in a few different things, nursing homes, hospitals, home health and hospice, and now in community mental health with LifeSpring. And I've been here for about a year. And so it's a wide variety of experience, but it's all been around healthcare. Controlling expenses has been a big part of every step along the way. That's for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Before we got started recording, Stephen, I was telling you, every one of these seasons, we try to do what I would call a weird episode, like one of them that maybe doesn't fit quite with the rest, either a cultural conversation or something outside the box. And this season, what we're looking to do is try to uncover some misconceptions in sterile processing or some knowledge gaps. And so I invited you on for the weird episode. I'm sure you're not surprised by that.
I'm not shocked at all that my name came to mind when you were thinking of the weird episode. I take it as a compliment.
Well, that's right. Stephen and I are co-pastors at a church here in Louisville, and leading up to Christmas, Stephen preached a sermon with some like bright green and red suit pants on the stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a surprise at all.
That's right.
So Stephen, the conversation today is around capital budgets. And the misconception that I wanted to address is what the real implications are for departments that have an operational expense limit or, a spending limit, which is why we titled this episode the $4,999 problem. Anything that's under $5,000 and it's okay to buy it. If not, it goes on to the evil capital expense list. So maybe to get us started, could you give us a couple of definitions here and help us think through the difference between operational expenses and capital expenses and why there even are separate categories between these two kinds of things?
You got it. So an operational expense, generally speaking, is something for the value of that expense you're going to use within the current year. Like it's a 12-month or less spend. And anything that's going to last longer than a year, you will do something called depreciation. You will put that, instead of going straight to the income statement with it, here we have this expense for $5,000. We're going to recognize that expense a little bit over time, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, depending on that asset. And so it's just a more accurate way to recognize expense. So because if you use something for 10 years, it makes sense to show the expense of that for 10 years. And it just smooths things out to better match what's actually happening in the field, in the operating room, wherever you may be. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And all that makes sense from the accounting side of the aisle, like, which bucket we want to put expenses in and how we handle that from a depreciation standpoint. From the operational side in the department, what the difference feels like is the operational expense budget is where you have the liberty to get things done, and the capital expense budget is the place where hopes and dreams go to die.
Yeah.
So
That
is that?
That definitely checks out. That's how a lot of people feel, because they are two separate budgets. You create two budgets for the year, your operational budget and your capital budget, completely different buckets, related to each other, obviously. But it's a completely, your operational expense is generally just the same stuff all the time. You need the same kind of supplies every month. You have the same personnel doing the work every month. There's not usually these big changes from month to month or day to day in your operational expense. But when you're talking about capital, it could be a huge amount, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million to spend on this asset. It's a totally different approval process, totally different people getting involved that wouldn't normally be involved in your day-to-day operational decisions, because CapEx interests people that wouldn't normally be interested in your data, like the board of directors or your shareholders or the auditors. There's a lot of people that are going to be more interested in that than what you spend on toilet paper in a week. Yeah. It's with all those extra eyes on CapEx That's why it feels like a hopeless endeavor. And it's also why people will try to get around the rules and make something not CapEx when it definitely should be. And they'll find all sorts of ways to do that. Yeah.
So from a financial standpoint, right, how then would you describe the capital expense? Meaning everybody says, well, get that under 5K or it's a capital purchase. But then you get that capital purchase where you feel like, well, I can't even ask for it because it's over 5K. And then it just goes into this world of unknown, and then it dies off. And then everybody kind of feels defeated, right, when they go to ask for that large sum. But thinking about the expenses that can be used, you got to know it's out there, right? Everybody has the funds within reason to make purchases, especially when you can see the dynamics of healthcare growing, not decreasing or declining. So why do you think the struggle is that where we're trying to figure out how do we ask? How do we get that ask, and how do then we make it happen instead of the ask and then it says next year, next year, next year, and then all of a sudden 5 years later, now our machine broke, So how do we tell the SPD world that? Like how do we present it to a leadership team that, it's a need, it's a must, or whatever?
It's a great question, and it frames
how do we not let it die?
Yeah, it frames it perfectly, because in my opinion, if people in your organization are scared to ask for capital expenditures, then that's a failure on management and upper level executives who have created this environment where people don't feel like they can ask for the stuff that they need. A lot of the times we start to micromanage, like we feel like to control expenses, the people up top have got to put the boot on people to keep expenses down. And then especially in the healthcare world, where what we spend on equipment is every single day directly related to what's the business that we're doing. Like this isn't just like a service organization where it's people oriented. Like obviously people are involved, but medical equipment that can cost millions and millions of dollars is how it keeps going. And so people need to feel comfortable asking for that stuff. Let me let you in on a secret. Like budgets are not set in stone. Budgets are a very, I'll say, usually inaccurate guess that we made a year ago on what you were going to spend today. And it can be wrong. It is wrong all the time. And you get 3/4 of the way through the year, and a lot of the times the budget's like, oh, what a mess that is. Don't even pay attention to the budget. So if people are making decisions, operational decisions based on, I've got to stay under my budget, or I've got to circumvent the CapEx rules, then it's a up and down failure from top to bottom. And it's usually related to communication. Like we're not talking to each other enough about how to properly make these decisions so the organization runs smoothly. And if you wait to start communicating until that moment when it's gone bad, then you've already lost. It needs to be a constant conversation.
Right. Stephen, you've mentioned a couple of times the games that people play to try to get around capital expenditures and reclassify things. And the one that comes to mind is invoice splitting, right? I can remember, Jamie, back when borescopes were still fairly new in the industry, I was very excited about it. We had some arthroscopic shavers. We wanted to have a borescope in the department because the IFU recommended it for the devices we had. And I forget the number, but it was like, I don't know, $7,500 or something like that. It had a real clinical impact, right? We were getting a good one. But there were two components to it. So if we had included them together, which, it is kind of one thing, it would have been over our spending threshold. But if I bought the monitor on one invoice and bought the actual borescope on the other, then they were both under that spending limit. And so, of course, that's what we ended up doing to get what we needed. Stephen, I'm curious, like that kind of thing feels harmless, when we've got our finger on the pulse of what the budget is. There's probably room for that in the operational budget, but it definitely is not in the spirit of the law of what these spending limits are supposed to be. Like, what kind of financial risk or impact does that have for a healthcare department? Like, does accounting care about that kind of activity going on?
Yeah. And Generally, we do. Sometimes it is harmless. This isn't, accounting seems like just this legalistic black and white endeavor, but there is a lot of gray area in accounting, and it's not something that most accountants are comfortable with, but there's a couple reasons why it matters. Number one, and most, dangerous possibly, is the auditors. Like if auditors discover at your year-end audit that you have been doing stuff like this to circumvent your own CapEx rules, they're going to ding you for that. And if it becomes a material problem, it can become something that gets reported to shareholders, board of directors, all kinds of stuff. If it's a huge systemic problem that it hits a certain percentage of your operational expenses, it really can cause some problems from an audit perspective. Another reason it matters is for creating budgets. So if you are looking at your prior year's expenses in order to create the budget for the next year, and there is some hidden CapEx in your operational expenses, that is going to muddy that data. And if I'm legalistic about anything, it's keeping the data clean, because good data creates good decisions. And if you've got, if half of your operational expenses in this one account could have been CapEx, then that's going to mess everything up for the next year, because you may not need that CapEx spend for the next year.
Funny you bring this up, Stephen, because I wanted the conversation to go here at some point, and that's about budgeting for these sterile processing departments. Everywhere that I've worked, it has been a use it or lose it kind of system for budget. If you managed to have some wins on financial responsibility and find some cost savings and spend less than what you were budgeted for, then next year's budget comes out and your budget has shrunk, and they want you to do it again.
You get punished for it, right? You get punished for spending wisely.
Yeah. That's right. And what that tends to motivate, of course, in departments is, oh shoot, we've got 10% of this budget left and only 1 month left to go. Like we need to invent some things to spend that money on that will help us out next year so that we don't get our budget shrunk. Like, is that a problem everywhere? And is there an ideal way for budgeting that fixes that problem?
It is a problem everywhere.
Yeah, but you mentioned audits, right? And I'm going to tell you right now, being in the world of sterile processing, nobody thought about that. So we do, right? In our world, we don't have time to ask and wait, right? Mm-hmm. So then we do that exact thing. How can I get this under my operational expense so that we can keep moving, so that we can go forward, we can take care of patients, and it's all safe? So I actually took notes, because nobody thinks about, there is auditors. Somebody can see that. Somebody can see that the spends are going. We're a fixed department. In healthcare, SPD is a fixed department. So those are some highlights that kind of stand out for me, is I didn't realize there is a back end that could get muddy. I mean, I'm not going to probably stop what I'm doing because I need the product. I'm not going to, because we need our stuff, and I get the difference between operational and then at the same time, hey, a surgeon really wants this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's $6,000. But I can cut that in half, just as Bobby was saying, and give me a 3,000 quote and a 3,000 quote, right? So that's kind of eye-opening for me. I'm not going to lie. Yeah.
Well, good. And it is a problem everywhere. Like this is not specific to y'all.
Yes.
And pretty much not just healthcare, like across the board, because we've got the finance people who are thinking financially, and we've got the operational people who are just trying to do their jobs. And the last thing the finance department should be doing is like getting in the way of people doing their work, especially in healthcare, obviously. And so it is a pretty big problem everywhere. Educating your operational people in the field about finance, and in some way, like getting them to like enjoy it or care about it even a little bit, it can go a long way, instead of like creating this animosity, like just this wall between ops and finance. I think more communication there is definitely to go back to Bobby's question about the budgets, the use it or lose it thing. There are a couple ways to deal with that, neither of which are perfect. And one way is to communicate to your people, like, our policy is if you don't lose it, you may not lose it, because creating the budget needs to be a conversation between ops and finance. And you say, well, we came in $10,000 under this budget. However, next year we plan it looks like we're going to need that. That creates a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. If you've got, like when I was at U of L, that was $1.5 billion budget. And right now I think they're at $2 billion. They're even bigger. And like one surgical department talking about one GL account that needs a $50,000 budget. I mean, it's just a drop in the bucket. And so all that is so easy for that to get lost. So actually having that conversation and being more proactive about creating a good plan is great, but it's so hard to pull off. It's just, with large companies, it's so hard to pull off. But it's a great way to do it if you can.
Right. You've heard some success stories along these lines, Stephen, of departments that have adopted either some new practices or some new spending habits to try to get some cost savings, and then negotiating with their finance department to redeploy some of those dollars in dealing with their labor deficit and how short-staffed they are. And that sounds like a dream at most places that I've worked. Like, okay, I don't even know who I would talk to in finance, and then getting to the table to have that kind of negotiation. Like, okay, if we can save these dollars over here on doing this thing, can we get another technician to help balance it out, or maybe even redeploy some of that cost savings that the technicians have worked really hard on an across the board pay increase for the team. Like, those kinds of creative conversations in finance do happen out there. It's just not been a part of the story that I've walked through.
And something you said in that illustrates the problem, in that they don't even know who they would go to talk to about that. And if that's the case, that's a management fail. Like, people in a department in your hospital or wherever need to know who your finance person is. Who is your accountant that is actually looking at these things? And if you've never spoken to that person, or if I as the accountant haven't reached out to that person, that's a fail. So there needs to be more communication in that regard, for sure. But yeah, and you're right, it's difficult, but if you can pull it off, that's a healthy organization. Now, another way to deal with it is to stick with the use it or lose it model. But for that to really work, and for it not to frustrate departments in the field, you have to also be able to go over budget when you have to. Like, if you use 80% of your budget in year one, and then they drop you that 20% for the next year, but then you need to operationally go over that budget, it has to be okay for you to do it. So there's like the use it or lose it mentality, but then the use it and then some mentality. And both of those things have to coexist in order for that to work. And that, again, that's still going to be a communication issue. Like, if you plan on going over your budget 20% as a department manager, you're going to need to be at least a little bit financially minded and know about it and be able to explain to accounting why that's going to happen. And if it's a healthy organization, that should work too. But again, it takes work, and it takes talking to each other.
Gosh, I have so many follow-up questions. It's amazing to hear your perspective on things. The one that kind of stands out the most, well, I have two, but is there any way to describe to everybody listening how your budget of staff, because like Bobby said, if we cut here, we can increase here, but how do you explain to people that your dollars can consist of you spending on what the needs are, like supplies and instruments and so on and so forth, but at the same time, that same spend is for staffing, right? Mm-hmm. Because I just got asked that question. Well, if you want more staff, where are you going to reduce? And I went, what do you mean? That's two different things. Like, I'm spending money to support the OR. I need staff to do so. So how do you explain to our listeners how those actually go hand in hand?
Yeah. So the challenge of this, you have to bring in revenue to talk about this, because matching revenue with expenses is the key to good accounting. If you know how much a department is bringing in with a net revenue, not gross revenue that you're not going to collect, but net revenue that actually turns into cash in the door. Because this is hospitals. So if you bill $100, you might get 20, you might get 30, you might get 5. You just never know. So knowing how much your department is bringing in from a revenue perspective is the key to knowing how much it's okay to spend. And the mix between supplies and personnel is very much industry specific. We're in a mental health organization. Our supply expense is nothing. All of our expense is people and their knowledge and their skills and their licensure that they had to work so many years to achieve. And so every department, every organization is going to be different. But yeah, if your department is bringing in, $5 million in revenue and your supplies and equipment expense is $2 million, your personnel expense is $4 million, whatever, I'm just making up numbers. You're at a net loss as a department. And so if you have that loss, that's the part where management sees that and they're like, okay, this won't work. You say you need more people, but your department's already in the red. You're not making us any money. And so, that's the knowledge you kind of need to start with. And at LifeSpring, we constantly have to make difficult decisions when we see, a location or department that is, just not efficiently operating. Everyone has to make these kinds of decisions and it's so difficult. But then when you're a person in that department doing the work, there's not enough people working here. Like we are understaffed. Like you feel understaffed regardless of what anyone in finance is saying. So it is such a difficult, give and take situation there. And also I say matching revenue with expenses like it's an easy thing to do. It is like deciding how much the neurosurgery department at a hospital makes is incredibly difficult to get an accurate number. So yeah, it's because departments in a hospital setting are so interrelated. Like there's, surgery, there's radiology, and everyone's involved in the same procedure. How do you know who's making the money? It's a rat's nest.
Yeah.
The more accurate data you have, the better.
And then it is a mess. And then add to the pile that sterile processing doesn't produce any revenue. We support the largest revenue producing department in the hospital, but we're generally viewed as just the cost center. And so, yeah, add that to the pile of reasons that it's difficult sometimes to get what we need in those conversations with finance. Stephen, we're about out of time here, but I want to wrap with one follow-up question. And it comes from what you said about if you work with a budget that's a use it or lose it model, you've got to be okay with spending some additional, and the leader needs to be prepared and financially capable to have some conversations about why we're spending over budget. I wanted to end this talking through some of the political risks of the financial games that we play. Like in your time working at the hospital, were there ever like financial decisions that were made by departments that maybe cast a leader not in the best light? Like if somebody's constantly playing the operational expense game and trying to sneak capital purchases in, like does that create political risk for that leader or personal relational risks with finance?
It absolutely does. And I've got, an illustration for that. So at U of L, our VP of finance, pretty high up the executive chain, obviously not all that involved in day-to-day operational accounting, but he took it upon himself to maintain control over the CapEx process because so many people were trying to mess with this and get around the rules. And he basically got angry and it's like, I'm going to control this whole thing. And there were a lot of people in individual departments within the hospital that came to resent him for how he managed that. But all he was trying to do was follow the accounting rules, our own processes. He was just trying to do what we've said that we're going to do. And that guy is now CFO of U of L Health. So he's still there. He's doing great. But yeah, there is a real, it's not danger, but if you plan on working at a place, making a career out of this place, there cannot be this animosity between operations and finance. And if you get a reputation, either way, if you get a reputation as a department manager for constantly trying to break the rules and get around stuff, people are going to notice that and they're going to remember that when it comes time to reorganize or to hand out raises and promotions. I mean, all that stuff matters. But then again, if you get a reputation as a finance person of being really legalistic and just completely black and white thinker with no room for negotiation or compromise, people will also But there are executives over the operational side of the hospital too. And they're going to be on the side of their people. The CFO is going to be on the side of his people. So if we're constantly at war, nobody's getting promoted. It's just going to be a mess.
Yeah, well said. And I've seen that play out as well. Departments that get a little bit more negotiation credit or credibility when they're talking about a big contract or a big change in instrument spending, or even when it comes to negotiate the pay rate for technicians. If they've been the type of leader who's actively trying to support finance, find cost savings, and
right.
Yeah, that gives you a lot of credit. Stephen, thanks for taking us a couple steps outside of the sterile processing department today and giving us a ride along in the back of the accounting van, I guess, on the episode today. I've learned quite a few things, and I've appreciated it. A really great episode.
Yeah, you definitely gave a lot of people out there something to think about.
Very good. Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And that was Stephen Benzel, Director of Accounting at LifeSpring Health Systems and former healthcare system accounting manager as well, telling us what it really does cost when we start playing games with the capital expenditure list. Jamie, really interesting interview. It's been quite a few years since I've had to sit in a CapEx meeting and argue for why the dollars allocated to surgery need to go to sterile processing and not some equipment in the OR. But I don't miss those meetings.
Oh, they are time consuming and full of numbers. So it's and in any healthcare system you go into, obviously everybody has their own separate roles. So in one healthcare system, you might have 0 conversations about it, and then others they might want you to dive on in. I'm learning all kinds of things with the understanding of how each budget works and how it can actually affect staffing. It's mind blowing. Yeah. The stuff you learn. Yeah, for sure. The staffing conversation is an interesting part of it. I appreciated you bringing that up, like trying to balance labor budgets and operational expenses and making those two things work together, because we do think of them as separate budgets, but they do tend to roll up under the one big SPD budget that as sterile processing leaders we're being asked to manage. And that can go both ways. It can work for you if you're really killing it on your operational budget, but if you're struggling with that, it can create a bit of a squeeze as well. So yeah, really interesting conversation today. Yeah, it definitely was. It was, but hey, we all need to learn somewhere, and hopefully people can take little bits and pieces from that and kind of incorporate it into their daily routines.
Yeah, I think so. And the one thing I would underline from what Stephen said from the episode is he's just giving some advice to us is the communication piece. He said that, sterile processing leaders ought to know the name of the person in finance to whom they need to be responsible and start having some conversations and asking some questions. So if there is a healthcare finance week out there like SPD week, maybe figure out what week that is and buy them some donuts and take it down to finance and just introduce yourself and start that conversation. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. We will look for you again next Monday as we continue through this season SPD Fact Check, uncovering some knowledge gaps and misconceptions out there. But until we talk to you again next time, on behalf of Jamie, myself, and the whole team over here at Beyond Clean, keep fighting dirty. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.